Greetings all, this is Davion Fuxa. This is Chapter 2.2, Later Experiences of A Conversation with Myself, and here's a continuation of the last chapter, Early Beginnings. Moving in with my grandparents began when I stayed over one night, and later told my parents I wouldn't mind living here. I don't know what sort of discussion might have taken place between my parents and grandparents, but I ended up soon after living with them. Life was far better living with my grandparents. A healthier living environment from a house that was cleaned regularly and not as cluttered was perhaps the biggest influence on me living with my grandparents. But also being able to help out my grandparents as they aged and grew older was part of the reason my parents had let me live with them. My grandfather was strict and just kept me in line and well behaved, along with helping my grandfather to instill a sense of mannerism. That said though, his mind was set in certain things. He often complained that I walked up and down the stairs far too loudly, and requested I not drink too much milk. Regardless though, he and my grandma were easy to live with. My parents, also keen on my living well, had no problems buying milk from my grandparents' household, or offsetting anything else they personally disagreed with on my grandfather's opinions. Soon as well, I was considered old enough to do some household chores. This initially included shoveling snow and raking leaves before soon becoming mowing the lawn and pushing the snowblower. These tasks I still continue to do today, along with others that I was deemed worthy enough to do. Going to a different junior high school offered some big changes to my school life. Besides the fact that I was going to a new school, I was in classes along different people than those I grew up with. Some students from my elementary days did attend the school as it doubled as a French junior high school for the French elementary school that I had originally gone to, while other students from the English elementary school sometimes moved into the area for the junior high school I now attended. Regardless though, I didn't really become friends with most of the people I knew from before. I did, however, become friends with people I met for the first time at the new school. During junior high, I made friends with two other boys my age. One was of Arab descent and another was of Asian descent. Eventually the one of Arabic descent moved away, but the one of Asian descent, who I will call Jarek, I got along with well. Our friendship continued into my years at university, and I still consider him my best friend even now. I commonly send emails to him and help him out from time to time. In regards to what was taught to me, I also started to understand what subjects or interests I enjoyed or was good at. I also began to learn what courses or activities I disliked or simply wasn't good at. All courses offered to me at the junior high school level were mandatory, and I had no choice one way or another on what subjects I could take. I enjoyed reading the great works of many old writers through what we were required to read. Works such as the Chrysalids, Fahrenheit 451, or The Catcher in the Rye sometimes greatly influenced how I thought or made me think about things. Others, such as Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies, influenced me greatly. In spite of the fact that I liked reading though, I didn't really understand the point of poetry. Spelling and grammar was difficult, and creative writing was something I was not necessarily good at. English was mostly a course to me, liking it depending on the flavor of the month. History and the social sciences were also subjects I liked quite a bit, and was quite good at. In fact, my grade 8 history teacher was completely taken back when I scored the third highest mark on the final test he gave, mostly due to the fact that it was an open book and I wrote the test without the book. Outside the written courses, I was also good at art and playing the violin. I enjoyed and was good at physical education as well, which mostly consisted of extremely casual play of kickball, dodgeball, jumping rope, and other very low-key physical activities that didn't require a whole lot of gear to play. However, even though I liked physical activity, I was simply not strong enough for most of the sports teams at my school. Just trying to join the soccer team apparently required a strength test along with the test of one's soccer skills. Most of the other courses I simply learned and didn't really think much in terms of liking or disliking them. Math, the sciences, sewing and cooking, and French were simply just courses I had to pass. None of these courses I was necessarily bad or good at. One course still quickly stood out from the rest. Woodworking was one course that should have been much like the other courses, in that I didn't think much of it. However, late in the final days of the course I had an injury which abruptly brought me into the first real case of reality telling me I was bad at something. Towards the end of grade 8, I had a near-critical injury involving a bandsaw for one of the activities in woodworking. While using the bandsaw, I had got my right index finger cut by the teeth of the bandsaw. Luckily for me, the cut was exactly in line with my finger, this resulting in the cut taking out a small piece of my middle joint. Had it been that the cut had been across my finger in any way, I would have likely lost my finger. At the time, I didn't realize the grave impact of the incident. I realized I had received a single significant injury, but I felt no pain. My dad came to the school, and I was immediately and literally taken across the street to the children's hospital. Being nervous, coming to the hospital for my first time, I initially refused to get treated and subsequently had to wait a bit before I was eventually looked at. Upon being brought to the doctor, I had a cut closed with 2 stitches. The fallout of the incident, though, resulted in woodworking being dropped from my school and possibly the entirety of all schools in my school board. Most likely this was done to protect the schools from the liability of lawsuits coming their way in case someone pressed the school for a serious injury resulting from the coursework the schools had made mandatory for the students to do. My school life during my time in junior high school wasn't too eventful, but it was notable. However, upon completing grade 9, my time at elementary school finally collided with my life in junior high school. While the districts for elementary and junior high school were small, high schools covered vast areas of where I lived. High school would be a mix of familiar faces from the past and present, along with new faces of the future. What's more, high school was a time of mandatory courses and optional courses. People who I've gone to school with in elementary and those I now went to school with all ended up in Queen Elizabeth High School. Though I will note that St. Patrick's High School, which was a couple blocks away, took those who were being taught in French from my junior high and elsewhere. Despite the fact, though, some courses required those from St. Patrick's to come over to Queen Elizabeth, as they weren't offered at both schools or needed to be taught in French. In terms of associating with people, though, I still didn't make too much progress befriending people. What's worse is that during the time of raging hormones, I did pretty horrible when it came to making advances or conversations towards the other sex. Still, I guess I shouldn't consider myself lucky because I didn't make any enemies either. In spite of my lack of socializing with others, I did, however, befriend one of my classmates along with Jarek. He was another boy of Caucasian descent who had moved from Calgary, Alberta, to our city and now went to our high school. He still lives here working for a local company and is happily married. I periodically visit him and his wife from time to time to hang out and play video games, or do some basic exercise throwing a frisbee or football in a nearby park. In terms of the coursework I picked, I noticed that the subjects were beginning to get harder and harder to understand. French in particular I couldn't understand anything about and promptly pretty well dropped. Other courses like math required increasingly greater amounts of study and work to wrap my head around. Plus it didn't help that I was put in the advanced mathematics program for my high school. I didn't necessarily hate those courses, but I'm not one to enjoy challenges on subjects I don't really enjoy. In regards to other coursework, I found keyboarding was quite easy, computer applications class was fairly fun, and home economics gave useful information that could benefit me later in life. However, I didn't really like geography, the sciences didn't really interest me, and I also found that by the time of high school my interest in violin was beginning to wane. I continued to do violin, though, throughout high school and after because it made my parents happy. That and there was many girls in my after-school violin class, one of which I liked, and a violin teacher encouraged me to keep going. Outside and along my school experiences, I took part in many other activities or groups. I played soccer and began curling at an early age, and I continued these activities up and into high school. Early on, my dad was my team soccer coach, as well as my teammate for curling matches later on. I also participated in baseball for a brief time, with my uncle being my baseball coach. These activities were done in the local area where I lived. Playing the violin was more than just a simple additional school subject either. I went on many trips to play in concerts outside the school. One trip even saw me go to St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador to play the violin. This trip was special in being the first trip that took me outside of my home province of Nova Scotia, in which I wasn't visiting family. I also was part of the Scouts Canada with Beavers, Cubs, and Scouts. During Beavers and early on in Cubs, these groups were mostly consisting of just boys, but later the girls were allowed to be in the program. The troops I joined were much less active in outdoor activities. but I went on a fair share of outdoor trips flying in cabins and in the wilderness. There is also one long trip to the island Newfoundland, where we travel all over the wilderness of that island. Later, I eventually joined a different all-boys scouts troop that was more active outdoors, but I didn't really stay long with them as the outdoor camping wasn't all that much fun. Organizational fun wasn't just restricted to Scouts Canada either. I was sent to various camps during summertime of varying types. Some were educational, others were outdoor camps, and one in particular involved me going to Prince Edward Island to a Christian camp, where my aunts and uncles on my other side were some of the leading staff. This concludes the Chapter 2 part, I guess. I'm probably going to continue on with my first real look at aspects toward family and Christianity and all that. But it'll also still cover a little bit about my real life and all that. After that, I'll probably get into my recent life, and that'll include what I've been doing in university, jobs, and all that type of work. So this is a little bit longer than usual. Now, I'll also note that I'm being kind of vague about my identity, and part of the reason for this is because I'm not really trying to give away who I really am. I like to keep my private life private, and you'll respect that. So that's why you're seeing me say like my siblings, or I'm giving like nicknames to my friends who I was friends with. I only really differed with the name of my high school because the high school it no longer exists at this time, and I'll cover that in a later chapter. I'll also note that because it covers such a wide area of the city that I live in, it's unlikely that you could sort through the naming list to really get my information. And besides the fact that it doesn't exist anymore, you can't really find it either. The other school, St. Patrick's High School as well, it also doesn't exist either, so that's another reason that I mentioned it. Alright, that'll be it for this chapter, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll probably actually start to get really into the opinions and aspects part of my recordings a little bit later after like chapter 4. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to try and speed up these recordings. I realize that people probably won't have much to comment on for the next little bit because I'm just mostly going over my aspects of my life. And while I guess it might be interesting to listen to, I realize that it won't be until I actually start to get into my opinions that people will actually really be making comments. There might be a few comments, I guess, for the Christianity bit that I'll be doing next, but for the most part, I doubt there will be much. It will just be mostly about family and friends. Anyhow, take care, and I'll be on vacation very soon, so this will probably be one of the last videos for this week.